consider a scenario in which the US dollar's dominance is challenged and governments around the world actively seek alternatives. As more countries de-dollarize, a seismic change is taking place, with potentially disastrous ramifications for American energy businesses and farmers. But that's not all. Saudi Arabia, Algeria, and other countries are planning to join the BRICS alliance, hoping to replace the petrodollar entirely. We'll look at the interesting terrain of de-dollarization and its potential impact on the global economic system in this eye-opening film. Prepare to unearth hidden dangers and untangle the complicated network of currency warfare as the world attempts to rewrite the laws of the game. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, known as the BRICS countries, are pushing ahead with their de-dollarization initiatives, making substantial headway in undermining the supremacy of the US dollar and the petrodollar system. This trend can be seen in their behaviors, such as selling US treasuries and seeking other currency arrangements. Leaders in France and Brazil have expressed worry about their countries, over-reliance on the US currency, and pushed for less dependency. Brazil, for example, has formally established currency changes with China, avoiding the need for the dollar as a middleman. The Chinese yuan has even surpassed the euro as the second largest international reserve currency in Brazil. Furthermore, China and Brazil have been using the yuan in important global commodities deals, diversifying their currency usage even further. Furthermore, the BRICS countries' founding of the new development bank gives an alternative to the US-led World Bank and International Monetary Fund, IMF. This development bank's membership has grown to include Bangladesh, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and Uruguay. These acts represent a growing trend towards alternative financial institutions that undermine traditional Western-led organizations' control. The BRICS nations' de-dollarization initiatives have broader repercussions, potentially affecting American energy businesses and farmers. China and Brazil's use of alternate currencies, such as the yuan, in global commodities transactions may lower demand for American soybeans and oil, resulting in losses for US exporters. Overall, the BRICS countries' de-dollarization progress, including the sale of US treasuries and the exploration of alternative currency arrangements, demonstrates their determination to challenge the existing global financial order and reduce reliance on the US dollar and petrodollar system. France's and Brazil's presidents have emerged as prominent supporters of lessening reliance on the US dollar and developing closer currency exchanges with China. The advocacy reflects a rising desire among certain countries to diversify away from the US dollar and consider alternate arrangements. French President Emmanuel Macron has been a vocal supporter of less reliance on the US dollar's extraterritoriality. He's advocated for less reliance on the dollar as a universal currency for international trade. Macron's approach indicates a determination to limit the US's power and control over international financial activities. Similarly, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has taken actual steps to encourage currency swaps with China, signifying a shift away from the US dollar as a medium of exchange. Brazil has officially confirmed bilateral currency exchange agreements with China, effectively eliminating the necessity for dollar transactions. This trend demonstrates Brazil's desire to diversify its currency usage and minimize its reliance on the US dollar in international trade. The French and Brazilian presidents' advocacy efforts reflect a broader trend of countries wanting to develop alternative currency arrangements to lessen their exposure to the possible problems connected with the US dollar's supremacy. These countries are actively attempting to promote stronger economic cooperation and strengthen ties with a significant global economic power by exploring deeper currency exchanges with China. Overall, the French and Brazilian presidents' advocacy for less reliance on the US dollar and currency exchanges with China represents a growing push among certain nations to diversify their currency usage and challenge the US dollar's predominance in international trade. The Chinese yuan has crossed a critical threshold by becoming Brazil's second largest international reserve currency, indicating the yuan's growing importance in global financial markets. This development highlights China and Brazil's growing economic connections and efforts to diversify their reserve holdings. The yuan's use in large global commodities transactions between China and Brazil underscores the currency's growing importance. Both currencies have shown a willingness to use the yuan as a substitute for traditional currencies such as the US dollar. China and Brazil minimize their reliance on the dollar by undertaking commodities transactions in yuan, contributing to the de-dollarization trend. Brazil's use of the yuan as a reserve currency and its inclusion in global commodities transactions reflect the country's strategic shift towards a more diverse currency portfolio. Brazil hopes to reduce the dangers associated with over-reliance on a single currency and strengthen its financial stability by diversifying its international reserves. The increased use of the yuan in global commodities trades represents a step towards China's currency internationalization. China strengthens its currency's adoption and builds a stronger influence in global trade and finance by enabling yuan transactions. The yuan's growing prominence in Brazil's reserve holdings, as well as its use in significant global commodities transactions, illustrate the continuous shift in global currency dynamics. As more countries look for alternatives to traditional reserve currencies, the yuan's rise reflects China's desire to establish its currency as a viable worldwide alternative to the established dominant currencies. The New Improvement Bank, NDB, which was established by the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is progressively viewed as an option in contrast to the World Bank and the Global Money-Related Asset, IMF, the two of which are driven by the US. This Bank for Development has risen to popularity as a forum for developing nations to fund infrastructure projects and advance sustainable development. The New Development Bank, NDB, is a shift from the traditional financial institutions that have been dominated by the West. Its mission is to establish a framework for financing development initiatives that is more equal and inclusive. Its primary mission is to provide financial assistance to member nations, infrastructure efforts, projects involving renewable energy sources, and other sustainable development endeavors. The New Development Bank, NDB, has begun accepting new member countries, marking a significant step that will further consolidate its position as a competitor to the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, IMF. Bangladesh, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and Uruguay are just some of the countries that have recently joined the NDB, boosting both its reach and its influence. The fact that the NDB is gaining more members is evidence that it is becoming increasingly acknowledged as a credible alternative to other financial institutions. By becoming members of the NDB, countries can gain access to financing for development projects without having to comply with the stringent requirements that are typically associated with loans from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. This is attractive to countries that want a greater degree of autonomy and independence in determining their economic policies. The creation of the New Development Bank, NDB, as an alternative to the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, both of which are led by the United States, indicates the intention of the BRICS countries and other participating nations to challenge the existing order of the global financial system and to create a more multipolar approach to the financing of development. The New Development Bank's potential to provide an alternative source of funding for sustainable development projects is continuing to expand as more countries join the bank. This encourages rising economies to work together more closely on economic matters. As more countries actively attempt to minimize their reliance on the US currency in international commerce, the worldwide trend of de-dollarization is gaining traction. This move has the potential to harm American energy businesses and farmers who have long relied on the dollar's dominance in global trade. Countries are considering alternate currencies for conducting international transactions as they move away from the dollar. This includes key commodity transactions like oil, where the use of currencies other than the US dollar can have an effect on American energy corporations. If countries choose to utilize currencies other than the dollar, such as the Chinese yuan or the euro, demand for American oil may fall, potentially creating losses for US energy exporters. Furthermore, there is a growing desire to replace the petrodollar, which refers to the practice of utilizing the US dollar as the principal currency for international oil transactions. Saudi Arabia, Algeria, and other countries have expressed interest in joining the BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and researching alternatives to the petrodollar system. The plan to replace the petrodollar might have serious consequences for the United States, undermining its long-held edge in global oil commerce. The shifting dynamics of international trade and currency usage may result in losses for American energy businesses and farmers. The global market landscape is altering as more countries explore de-dollarization and seek alternatives to the petrodollar, posing challenges and uncertainties for American exporters. Overall, ongoing de-dollarization initiatives and the search for a replacement for the petrodollar offer possible hazards to American energy companies and farmers, as their reliance on the dollar for trade may lessen. To limit potential losses in the face of growing global economic trends, adapting to this changing landscape would necessitate strategic modifications and diversity in trade practices and currency usage.